All right, click links, join channel here, become a member over at Subscribestar. I got a mailbox which someone has used to send me the Hobbit comics, the physical comics, but it's easier to do the video with the digital comics, the graphic novels. And comics like this have kind of been on my mind for a while because it's something that you will never see again, maybe. Probably because I was, if anyone sent me these comics, probably because I was talking about Chuck Dixon and Ravage, Kill All Men, how cool that was. I think I told people anything by Chuck Dixon, for sure, send me. And if you're not familiar with The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, the prequel, or the one that just came first, I guess I don't think it's really a prequel. These are the kids' stories he wrote. Well, doesn't a prequel imply that like somebody wrote it after? Is that what that? Anyway, these are the kids' stories he wrote, and they're very good because they're so obviously straightforward. They're just the kid's story. The wizard finds the hobbit, and the thing is that is like accelerate into that. Just write a kid's story and just do the best job you can with that. You got a wizard who comes to the Hobbit village. He meets up with the main character, and he wrangles him off into an adventure, and hilarity ensues. But then the story continues on, and it's fantastic. But you can tell, while it is all one connected story and it totally makes sense, it does feel like, I don't know, a dozen, 2 dozen scenes all put together with some gentle lessons throughout the story. They made a movie about it, and it was I don't know, 3 hour long films, and it sort of felt like it should have been even longer, even though it was one book and spread out maybe into a streaming show with it spread out over several years. I think that was, I don't know if that was before streaming. That might have been like when the Hobbit movie came out, like 2006 or something. And the fans of Tolkien hated the movie, and rightfully so, because the Lord of the Rings movies, which came out about 2000, were as good as you could get for a movie adaptation of a book. But especially if you got the extended cuts with all the various alternative scenes, you could watch how they crafted the story. But either one, like the shorter 3 hour version or the extended 4 or 5 hour version, it's like they both work very well. But the Hobbit movie that came like 5 years after was a departure from the storyline, and they started race swapping characters, so it just killed the stories. But they were 3 books, but they felt, the Lord of the Rings, but they felt more streamlined, even though The Hobbit was only 1 book. But The Hobbit was for young kids. It was just something for little kids to listen to. Fun, colorful scenes about cute little hobbits and dwarves running around doing simple things. And when you're reading to little kids, they listen to simple, cheerful actions, short actions, simple descriptions. And there's an art to writing all ages books that really are all ages. It's like SS Sniper Wolf doing her $1 million reaction videos saying, "Wow, guys, this is crazy," or something every 9 seconds to prevent copyright infringement and keep young people engaged, and low attention span people engaged, and probably a lot of like low IQ people engaged also. But she's a master at it, and she's probably made $100 million doing those kind. And the thing is, if I was thinking, if you're a pretty young girl, you're skinny, and you're comfortable in front of a camera, or like you think you can get comfortable, when you're in high school, you should be practicing making videos, and you could, like, there's just so much money out there for you, that to do it for 10 or 15 years, when you're like a teenager in high school, is definitely something you want to get on board with. Anyway, so the kids' stories are all the same. They have like short enough action scenes that shows Tolkien's skill in that he could write The Hobbit for kids, and then Lord of the Rings for older kids and adults, and maybe 12-year-olds would, like 12 and above, maybe 10 and above, would start to kind of get into the Lord of the Rings books. Though, man, people don't read like they used to. That's something that kind of needs to be looked at, because there's a density of information that comes with the written word on paper that you just don't have even with digital books, and you definitely don't have with social media. So the IQ of the nation has dropped since 2006. It's like, yeah, because you're holding a cell phone in your hand, or one of the reasons. So the books are great. The only odd thing was the poetry and songs, but you could read a bit of that and you could skip the rest if you wanted to. He's pretty solid at the poetry, and it definitely fits the stories. I know a lot of people like it, but you didn't have to read it all the way through to understand the story. It works either way. The concept is to tell a simple story and just tell it well. I like how it pops out of the frame like that. It's very cool. And he did. Nobody has come close since, and unfortunately, nobody will ever write something similar ever again. Not in the present political environment, and I don't see a way for this environment to change unless there's a civil war or peaceful dissolution or some kind of something something massively changes, or like a separation, de facto, perhaps not de jure, where like alternative community starts to build up, something like that, which that is actually happening right now. So that, I mean, what the future holds, who knows? Maybe JDA or Vox can can write this kind of stuff, based national stories. But they're even though they're great writers, but they're not big names. The industry would not allow them to be mainlined. Like the Hugo, I almost said Hugo Boss Awards. The Hugo, you've got one coming up, Bucko. The Hugo Science Fiction Awards are the history of that is fascinating to see who gets it. It's all like blue-haired weirdos. I want to say more than that, but YouTube is really cracking down on this kind of stuff. You have to see who's winning these awards. So they're giving these awards to each other, and they're not based on merit. The stuff they're giving awards are to books that don't sell, science fiction stuff that just doesn't sell at all. Nobody's on board with this kind of stuff. And it'd be like the equivalent of mags getting awards for like Kim and Kim or all the other stuff they've written that sells 900 copies by issue 5, where you've got Ethan selling Cyberfrog to the tune of $500,000, or all these other people selling these hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of campaigns. Are like relatively unheard of people. That should be a massive story. Oh yeah, it's John Malin guy. Yeah, or all these other people. It's like they're selling. They did a campaign on YouTube, and they made like $200,000. Oh, that's a big deal. Yeah, but it's never going to get covered in the mainstream. And all these other people, too. It's like you get people who are like the cash grab story with Cecil is probably the more interesting story to me because he is a comic unknown. Him and Donald DeLay came out with cash grab, which he sent me, which actually looks fantastic. That's an interesting story. It's like, yeah, so this guy is just kind of part of this community and he entertains people and people rewarded him. Yeah, what a weird concept. And left-wing kids, they hear that and they hate that because they don't understand it. Anyway, you're never going to get a story like this again because a story of hobbits and the dwarves and the elves and the whatever is not diverse enough. Never mind their fictional non-human characters. If it was today, the orcs, the trolls, the goblins are obvious dog whistles. It doesn't matter how stupid that is and how clearly untrue that is. I mean, there's a lot of us who are very based on alternative platforms who will give you the truth. And it's like, I can tell you on those platforms as well where I have free speech. It's like nobody read The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings and had those connections. Cultural Bolsheviks make those connections because they're literally insane people. So those people are stupid and they hate you, and it's not just benign stupidity; it's malicious evilness, and they will destroy everything that you touch because they're parasites that spread diseases. No, you can't have anything for yourself. They can have things for themselves, but your stories, your history, your culture must be destroyed, which I've covered before. The thing is, this only gets worse until you speak up against it because diversity is cancer. It's absolute cancer. It ruins every story because it's the definition of propaganda. Kids might not pick up on it, but they're learning about globalist propaganda at younger ages simply because we've been able to tell them about it and kick them screaming down the rabbit hole. The Hobbit works because it's a family, blood, tribal, nationalist type of story, and the machine is pushing globalists to destroy nations, and they do that, you do that culturally as well as politically. You have to break people's spirit first, culturally, before you do it politically. Every country in Europe will look the same. Nothing will actually be diverse or unique. It'll all just look like London, which is not a compliment if you've seen it lately. The Tooks and the Harfoots and the whatever, all these Hobbit tribes, they're all hobbits. And when the goblins are invading, they form up to do battle because they're all a part of one greater tribe. You have these discrete, diverse groups that are unique. And I mean, I've given the example, like one of the better examples is actually the Stephen King movie, The Dark Tower. Books were great, don't get me wrong, except for the self-insert that came in like book 6 and 7. That was ridiculous. But the movie, you're like, yeah, we didn't see the movie. Yeah, nobody saw the movie. I saw the movie so I could just see it and talk about it. And I saw the Shining sequel too, which was, hey, both movies, you race swap the characters. Effing genius. You really want to see, if you've read the books, go watch the Dark Tower movie. None of it works because I've said this before. I know I've said it 100 times, but it's a perfect example. They go to a town and it's all these, like, you have an Asian woman, clearly a Han Chinese woman or whatever she was. God, I hope she's Chinese. It's not like you're going to see the movie and correct me or look it up or something. She's actually Korean, whatever. And then you have clearly a black guy, and they're married, and it's like there's a lot of those couples throughout the town, and they're the main characters in the couple, and you're like, so did this town just form? And they do this in movies all the time, where it's all these clearly, like, just the be careful with my description here. Very clearly sub-Saharan person and a very clearly non-person coming together, and it's like the town is all like that. It's all these people, they just came together and they just paired off. You're like, this is the only suspension of disbelief. Yeah, you just threw it out the window. Like a child, that would go past a child, but then as you get a little older, you're like, wait a minute. This is like the first generation, because the second generation would be, if it was 100% like that, well, it would be 100% mixed, and there'd be variations, but like as you go down each generations, they all would just look exactly the same. That's how genetics work. So your storyline doesn't work. Listen, Hugo Boss. Listen, bigot. Yeah. I get called out all the time on Twitter for some reason. But it's always deflection and ad hominem. They never actually address the argument. I mean, like, from a story point of view, explain that kind of stuff. And The Dark Tower is a great example, and there's a bunch of other examples in movies. And it's like, well, so how did that movie do? And there's the next video I'm going to do is about that Dan DiDio interview where, like, he's lying to himself, but it sounds like he's starting to wake up. Anyway, I'll get to the next scene. Even in the books, he gives physical descriptions and variations among about the hobbits and the elves and the subgroups. It's very nationalist based. If you start reading these stories and think globalism versus nationalism and try to put that in that framework, you'll start to see, like, oh, it really does fit within, like, you start to see the propaganda, that the difference between a globalist organic story of tribe and homelands versus a nationalist story, and then versus a globalist story of, pushed by these Frankfurt School Bolshevik types of destroying everything through subversion and corruption. Actually, in the Hobbit movie, they had already started the cultural Bolshevism, which is, it's like a 9-hour piece of garbage. They had an elf and a dwarf, and they had some kind of relationship, which is Kevin Smith said in Clerks, 2? Interspecies erotica. So when you watch the movie, you probably thought it was silly, but you ignored it. And the thing is, after you put on the They Live glasses, it has a much deeper and darker meaning, because almost everything in Hollywood, almost everything they do after a certain point is evil. The Lord of the Rings, I don't know when that came out, 2002 or something, that was the last really good thing to come out of Hollywood. Just a few years later with The Hobbit, they started to destroy it with diversity, which is cancer. It ruins stories. You have to just be more honest about it and say that this whole globalist experiment has obviously failed, especially in stories. It absolutely destroys them. The feeling of The Hobbits is cozy. It kind of reminds me of, like, there's a whole kind of sub topic to be done on, like, why there's this, like, frog memes go around with the cozy and the friendly gang on social media about these little Apu frogs, and I forget what the other frogs are called. It's this cozy, it's like, if you look at frog posting and friend posting and cozy posting, you start to understand that people are very eager for a return to some kind of tribal based community. At least that's a feeling I get out of that. Anyway, it's organic to how people really are. When you compare it to the Rings of Power Amazon disaster, you have the Euro Hobbits who were in the exact same tribe as the Afro Hobbits. That's just silly. You're trying to sell a story using actors to portray these characters who are massively culturally and physically different from each other. They come from completely different evolutionary environments. That's why they look physically different, the morphology. Why they have different capabilities, pluses and minuses in different things that they're better at than others. They're different things. They're adapted for different environments. Like a coastal grizzly bear is not the same as an inland grizzly bear. They're similar, but they're not quite the same. That's why they're two. Whether you want to lump or split, you get where I'm saying with that. It's like you can't have actors who come from 10,000 miles away from each other suddenly put them together in the same tribe, because they're actors portraying these characters. There has to be some believability to it. But it's Hollywood, and they're just doing mountains of pharmaceuticals. But for some reason, the Irish girl in Rings of Power is in a tribe with a very clearly an African person. So how does that happen? They never explain it, and it doesn't happen. So it instantly destroys the story. In The Hobbit, the tribes are shared blood. They're fighting for each other. Everything modern is just dog waste. It's just crap on top of crap. And then these child prurient people of Epstein's Vacation Playhouse call you a phobic for pointing out that globalism is stupid and ruins stories. Rings of Power is actually a great comparison. I mean, there's so many great comparisons over the past 10 years because it's so bad in so many predictable ways. The Hobbit was a simple story told well. This guy writes, and he gets the story out there, gets it published, and that's mostly it. People have been, and he wants it to be commercially successful for sure, but it's like you can see it is an organic, natural story. People have been doing that for a long time. There are more commercial writers who do series. The thing is, once a series catches on with a book catches on with somebody, and you do a series and it starts to catch on and it grow with the audience, it becomes a cash cow, so they can't abandon it. The point is just to continue the series. And you're marketing to the audience, but even within that format of somebody doing a quick book every year, they try to be creative with it. Like even the Clive Cussler books, where he was putting these things out and he was associating other authors. Like he would probably do the skeleton frame of it, and then the other authors would come along and finish it up. But it mostly worked because the framework was so good. It was like it's an action adventure with a group of people who go around the world solving these kind of mysteries and blowing up ships and whatnot with the Newman agencies and all that kind of fun stuff. Oh shit! It works. It totally works. And I don't even know if he's still around. The guy's written so many great things. The thing is, what cultural Bolshevism is different. They buy the rights to a story and they insert and substitute elements into the framework of the story to push their toxic left-wing soy propaganda. They don't give a darn about the writer's artistic vision. Or did I mispronounce that? They only want the intellectual property name recognition, the bait and switch, and maybe the framework of the story, and they're hoping on social pressure to keep the audience from complaining about the race swapping. But people are complaining online, and they're, with the Rings of Power at least, they were not watching that. They watch, if you had like, I don't know, 1 million people watch the first episode, it just dropped like a rock after that. And people are talking about this kind of stuff, which is good. You have to talk about it. They don't want you to talk. Yikes, my guy, just let people enjoy things. Oh, no, hell no. Hell no. We tried that. It's like, wow, I'm just expressing my opinion on social media. What's the problem with that, buddy? And they really, really don't like that. People don't care about some Epstein Vacation types calling them istophobic. They call everyone that. It is finally losing its power. People just realize, yeah, maybe that word is not real exactly. It feels like some kind of Scientology manipulation tool. It's just a weapon used and invented by cultural Bolsheviks to manipulate the cattle. And, I really shouldn't talk bad about Scientology, not only because they'll probably come to my door, but because they might have, L. Ron Hubbard might have been right about a few things. And like Tom Cruise, he seemed to have made some very based dog whistling movies with Vanilla Sky and Eyes Wide Shut. Were really interesting films. I don't know if that had anything to do with Scientology, but interesting guy. And especially what he and Hubbard said about psychiatry. It's like, you might have been right about that. You might not to say that the Scientologists coming to your door aren't still wacky, but it's like there might have been some good stuff in there. Anyway, never give a cult your money unless it's to me. I'm starting a spiritual retreat in Eastern Oregon or something, or Idaho or Montana or something. We're going to align our spiritual chakras like every summer. It'll be a spiritual. If I get a few $1 million, I would definitely do that. Hollywood is to the point where it's so bad that it is poisoning almost all movies. Barbie did well, I think, mostly because it was a chick flick about some woke echo chamber vagina stuff. But Mission Impossible and The Expendables didn't do well because I think that the fair-eyed, light-haired European American men, by now Hollywood hates you. You know that there's something deeply, darkly wrong, not just in Hollywood, but America and the West in general. So why would you bother caring about movies? Like it's just a theory of mine. But anyway, you're not ever going to run out of old stuff to read and watch. And for new stuff, the answer is in the right-wing alternative community. There are these little epicenters that are starting to crop up around Comicsgate, Phantom Menace. Gab Marketplace is something that's popped up too. And there's a lot of alt payment processors, alternative social media platforms. eventually, I suspect that there will be something forming for the right-wing alt community who's just sick of all this, woke global propaganda, and they want to support their own community where you not have to worry about being canceled, to form some kind of extended marketplace networks or social networks or, maybe even communities to sell to people who are just sick of all this kind of woke cancer. Like you say that, and the left wing is immediately outraged. I have these conversations with people on Twitter, and they lose their mind. I go, maybe we should just separate into separate little communities, and suddenly they start losing their mind. I'm like, how does that affect you at all? It's like nobody's forcing you to join this community. If you enjoy censorship and deplatforming and being told, I mean, it's to look at what's sold on Indiegogo and the other site. You look at the front page, you punch in comics, or you're punching Comicsgate. It's like, maybe one thing will come up, but you punch in comics in general, and the stuff that is at the forefront is just, my lesbian for otherkin romance on Mars, where it's all just like Kim and Kim type of stuff, or even more just weirder and weirder. It's like, this is a BIPOC cooking book, coloring book for like adult children. Yeah, so $2,900. Yeah, there's some Comic-Gate book that it did like. I don't know, $100,000. You'd think that would, no. But this is, you get the idea. It's so fudging ridiculous. I mean, I look at this and it's like, it doesn't break my heart to look at something this good. It's we need more of this kind of stuff. But you're not going to market it in the mainstream. We have to set up an alternative community, because free of these gatekeepers, because they absolutely will gatekeep us. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys all next episode.